I love Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man books. I love Spider-Man games. I even love weird old Spider-Man cartoons. But most of all, I love Spectacular Spider-Man. But second most is the movies. But as I'm sure you guessed by the title and thumbnail, I don't love all the movies. In fact, there's one movie that I've personally hated for years. Half because I just didn't like it, but also because the fan reception around this movie was absolutely insane. But before we can talk about that, we got to talk about the two movies that came before it. So sit back, grab some snacks, and let me tell you why I hate Spider-Man No Way Home. Subscribe, please. I gotta level with y'all. This movie surprised me. I went into this fully expecting to hate this movie. Now, before you judge, last time I saw this movie, I was in middle school, and all I've seen about it since then is YouTube videos absolutely dogging on it left and right. And over the years, it had convinced me that this movie was awful. So when I rewatched it for this video, I was so ready to tear this movie apart, but I actually liked it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but it's not nearly as bad as people will have you believe. To start with the positives, the Vulture is a really good villain. The movie does a great job of making him sympathetic while also showing you why Spider-Man has to stop him. Also, that twist in the scene after it is so good. Also, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is pretty solid. I think they strike a nice balance between how much of a wallflower Tobey was and how unbelievably smooth Andrew was.
Goddamn.
Speaking of balance, they do a really good job of having Peter still learning how to be Spider-Man without it being annoying. All the mistakes he makes in this movie are completely understandable, and that goes a long way to helping it make it not annoying when Peter's messing stuff up. I also love how small stakes the story is, and it's still so refreshing in a world where the whole multiverse is at stake constantly. And overall, this movie is just really solid. It's not perfect, but the weird thing is, most of the problems with this movie are in all these movies and only become big problems in the later movies. For example, the villains. I know I just said that the Vulture was good in this movie, and he is, but there's one scene in particular that really gets under my skin. So in the scene, Shocker is getting chewed out and fired for being a dumbass, as usual. But before he leaves, he threatens to tell everything to the cops. The Vulture obviously can't have that, so he fucking annihilates him. If the scene ended here, it would have been so good, but it doesn't. Instead, they follow it up with this.
I thought this was the anti-gravity gun.
And I hate this. The movie did something so good and then immediately ruined it. And I genuinely have no idea why. It's not like they didn't want him to be scary, because later in the movie, he threatens to Spider-Man and everyone he loves with a gun. That's pretty scary. Also, I hate how they handled Uncle Ben in this series, because in this movie, and especially Civil War, it definitely feels like these movies were very much written with him having existed in mind. But I'll talk more about him later. Also, these movies are really bad at addressing what happens in the big team-up movies, but we'll get back to that in a minute. The last thing I'll say about this movie is that it's just really charming. If you're like me and you think you don't like this movie, I highly encourage you to go back and rewatch it, because if you're like me, it might just win you over. 7 out of 10. Remember how I said these movies are bad at addressing what happens in the team-up movies? Well, this one is the absolute worst at it. For those of you that don't remember, this movie takes place right after Avengers Endgame. You know, the movie where half of everyone died and got brought back to life 5 years later. And on top of that existential nightmare, they also have to address Iron Man's death, while also paying off the cliffhanger at the end of Homecoming in a satisfying way. And they weren't very good at it. First of all, the way they handled the snap always felt so cheap. No one we actually care about was affected by the snap in a meaningful way, aside from them having to restart the school year. Which, yeah, that sucks, but this is a horrifying situation that's being treated so casually, and it just rubs me the wrong way. Speaking of which, why in the hell is Aunt May so okay with Peter being Spider-Man? If my mom found out 15-year-old me was going out every night to fight ruffians and thugs, she might just kill me herself. And I highly doubt any parents would be this on board this quickly. This could have been fine if she wasn't really on board in the beginning of the movie, but it comes around to it by the end. Hell, in No Way Home, Peter even says that it was really hard when she found out he was Spider-Man.
When she found out that I was Spider-Man, it was really messy, and I don't think that I could go through with that again.
Wow, that sounds interesting. I would have liked to see it, but I will say, for the most part, they handled the death of Iron Man pretty well in this movie, except for one very frustrating scene. So, near the end of the movie, after Peter lost to the train, there's a scene where Happy's giving him a little pep talk, and he tells him not to be the next Iron Man, but to be Spider-Man instead. Now, ignoring the fact that that's the lesson he learned in Homecoming, about 30 seconds after this happens.
I love Led Zeppelin!
Bruh. Let me break this down real quick. So right after the movie got done saying he shouldn't try to be like Iron Man, you immediately turn to the audience and go, see, this is the music from Iron Man. Doesn't he remind you of him? What are you trying to tell me, movie? Also, while we're on this scene, I have two big nitpicks that these movies are very guilty of. One, I don't like high-tech Spider-Man. I think it works in Homecoming because the movie makes it clear that it's not his suit. It feels more like a work laptop than anything, so you still get that relatable everyman feeling there. Plus, he loses it at the end of the movie and has to figure out how to stop the Vulture by himself. But in the rest of these movies and the games, he just has access to high-tech equipment on the regular. Maybe it's a me thing, but it just doesn't feel right. And the second nitpick I have is something almost all new movies are guilty of: the overuse of CGI. Now, don't get me wrong, CGI definitely has a place in movies, but it is comically overused in these movies. Like in this shot, they just covered the whole suit in CGI to make it look damaged. Like, come on, y'all. You couldn't just make an extra suit and dirty this one up a bit? It's not like y'all are strapped for cash. But the stuff that really gets under my skin and actually makes me angry is the stuff that would have been easier to just go do. Like this shot of Nick Fury sitting in a chair. You really couldn't take these guys to a hotel room to shoot a scene? Really? Or this scene. Are you seriously telling me that you couldn't take Willem Dafoe, put his ass in a suit, and go outside for like half an hour to shoot this scene? Oh, but what about spoilers? He was in the trailer. But back to the movie. The writing here is really bad. Like, it's on the level of a DJ Khaled freestyle.
I'm a llama, red pajama, waiting, another one, waiting.
Okay, maybe not that bad, but still.
Waiting.
Like, when you're there and you're watching the movie, it makes sense, but when you actually sit down and think about it, it falls apart quickly. First of all, why are S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury so incompetent in this movie? Yes, I get that he's not actually Nick Fury, but that's not an excuse for him to be a dumbass. Like in this scene I was talking about earlier, you didn't even think to close the door while you were lore dumping to Spider-Man? Really? And this whole scene is dumb. You told everyone in this room, including the new guy you later say you were suspicious of, Peter's secret identity? Are you stupid? It's called a secret identity for a reason. This should be top secret information, and Nick Fury is just telling anyone who will listen, like a middle schooler who just discovered gossip. Also, Nick, what was your plan if the drone that can turn invisible whenever it wants didn't uncloak itself right before shooting you? Genuinely, what were you gonna do besides die? This stupidness applies to everyone in this movie. Peter's stupid. Peter's friends are stupid. S.H.I.E.L.D's stupid. Even the plot devices are stupid. It's insane to me that Peter's spider sense not working wasn't even mentioned until the final battle, except for the one scene at the beginning where Aunt May throws a banana at him. But even then, that barely counts considering the fact that it's a banana. It's not exactly lethal. And this one flaw steals so much of this movie's thunder, and it makes the final battle so hollow. Because as a viewer, this central plot point basically comes out of nowhere. So the main plot point of the final battle just kind of happens, and it's really unsatisfying. Also, Mysterio's plan is incredibly stupid. First of all, at this point in the MCU, the multiverse wasn't really a thing. So in canon, he was literally talking a bunch of gobbledygook and horseradish, which makes it even dumber that Nick Fury bought this for even a second. But you know what else should have tipped Nick Fury off? The fact that Mysterio was using regular bullets to break stuff. Seriously? Nick Fury, super spy, the most paranoid person in the world, didn't even think to go back and look at the crime scene enough to be like, oh damn, there's bullet holes literally everywhere. And the worst part is that Mysterio has these little air blasters in the drones that break stuff with no bullets necessary. So he was just leaving evidence for the love of the game. Also, Mysterio, what was your plan if Peter didn't give you the glasses? Seriously, what could you have possibly done to get the drones if Peter hadn't decided to give them away to a guy he just met? Would you have just waited around and hoped Peter decides that he just doesn't want them anymore? Mysterio's whole plan is dumb. Even his goal is dumb. To clarify, I can accept if a villain's goal doesn't really make sense, because at the end of the day, the point of the villain is that they're wrong. So their end goal being poorly thought out can make makes sense. For example, if Mysterio's plan worked and no one found out, he would have been fucked the second a real supervillain showed up. And I would like that if I was sure it was on purpose. But his whole plan is so dumb that I genuinely can't tell if it was supposed to be that way or if it was just more dumb writing. Who's to say? But what I will say is that the way the movie ended was actually really cool. And yeah, I could go through and nitpick the ever-living shit out of this movie and turn this into one of those hour-long snore fests, but I don't want to do that, because at the end of the day, this movie isn't awful, but it is really, really messy and very lazy. So for that, I'm giving it a 4 out of 10. Okay, now it's time to talk about the reason I'm making this video.
Hello, Peter.
Holy crap, I'm in Fortnite!
The reason I don't like this movie is simple. Nostalgia bait doesn't work on me. Seeing characters I like show up in other things and repeating classic lines doesn't do anything for me. And because of that, this movie makes me mad. Because this movie still could have been amazing, while still keeping all the point and clap nostalgia bait intact. But it really wasn't. And y'all don't understand. When I watched this movie, I really wanted to love it. But it's just so lazy and half-baked that even when I actively try to shut my brain down, it still has so much wrong with it. And honestly, it baffles me that they released it in this state. Let's break it down. The opening scene in this movie is actually really good. It has a very panicked energy, and overall it's just really solid. And at this point when I was rewatching it, I thought it wasn't going to be that bad. That didn't last very long. In the very next scene, Peter gets arrested by the police, and they say this to him.
Why would you risk it all by getting involved with a vigilante like Peter Parker?
What do you mean, illegal? If you'll remember back in Civil War, the main conflict was over something called the Sokovia Accords. And if memory serves, it basically makes superheroes obligated to register with the government. And Peter signed them. This man is government sanctioned. He's basically Spider-Cop. So why are y'all acting like him being Spider-Man wasn't endorsed by the government? AKA you. Anyway, the real problems with this movie start right here. First off, and this is a personal thing, but I really don't like that they brought Daredevil back into the MCU. Just cause I absolutely love Daredevil season 3, and I think the ending of it is legitimately perfect. And I knew if they continued the show that they were gonna shit all over it. And that's exactly what they did. Anyway, the actual issue I have with this scene is that Matt says this.
Well, I have some good news, Peter. I don't believe any of the charges against you are gonna stick.
Yeah, no. They just hand wave away all the legal trouble they broke their own lore to set up. See, here's the thing. I honestly don't mind this too much. At the end of the day, this isn't the verdict. It isn't a courtroom drama. It's a Spider-Man movie. But it really would have helped what happens later make a lot more sense if Peter and his family were facing some sort of legal trouble, or even just the money problems that come with legal trouble. Because as the movie is now, Peter jumps to brainwashing the whole planet way too easily. But we'll get back to that in a minute. For now, Peter heads back to school for the first day of senior year? Wait, so in Far From Home, he says that he's 16 years old. And in that movie, they also say that they were all forced to repeat the school year. So technically, he could still be a sophomore. So depending on how you slice it, there's a 2 to 3 year time skip in this one montage. But when you're watching the movie, it's clearly supposed to be a few weeks at most. So anyway, back to the movie. Peter and his friends get rejected from college. So he immediately decides to go see Doctor Strange so he can go back in time. You know, after 2 movies of Peter learning how to be responsible, he should probably know better by now. I'd accept this if there was something even a little bit more serious affecting him, like, I don't know, legal trouble. Anyway, since Doctor Strange lost the Time Stone, they settle on the next best thing, brainwashing the whole planet. And of course, the genius and the licensed doctor don't discuss the rules of the spell beforehand. Good job, guys. So here's the problem. The entire rest of the movie is built on this spell and the consequences of it going wrong, but we don't understand how it works. They try to explain it briefly, but it's a very flimsy explanation that boils down to it's magic, and you're just supposed to go along with it. And it leads to the whole setup of this movie being about as stable as a house of cards. But after this, the movie starts to pick up a bit, and we get a bunch of scenes of Peter tracking down the villains, and it's not bad, but there's definitely a couple questionable decisions. For example, why is the guy who was CGI before suddenly not not anymore, and the guy who wasn't CGI suddenly a walking sandbox. Also, why is Electro all of a sudden just regular Jamie Foxx instead of looking like this? I don't know, maybe the electricity that fixed his teeth also lined him up.
Nice.
Anyway, Peter catches all the villains, but before they can send them back, they realize that when the villains get sent back, they're all gonna die, except for these two. And I actually really like this. It's very in character for Spider-Man to want to help them, and it leads to a pretty cool fight scene with Doctor Strange. But the real problem comes right after, because after Peter strands Doctor Strange in limbo, he decides to bring the dangerous supervillains into Happy's home. I don't have a problem with this, but what I do have a problem with is the fact that he makes his friends go home because it's too dangerous, obviously. But he lets Aunt May, someone who is basically his mom, stay and help. I see no way this can end badly. But this sequence has another problem. They cure the villains way too easily, and it removes any actual weight that helping these doomed characters could have had. And I'm not saying we needed to see the whole process for every single villain. All we needed was to see the whole process with one. As it stands now, it's like, oh, here's the problem, and he just whips up a solution off screen. And it makes what could have been really satisfying payoff from decades old movies into stuff that just happens. Also, Peter, please don't grab him like that.
Whoa, hey.
Also, this is another nitpick, but why do they keep doing this? They keep adding more suits so they can sell more toys, but they do it in such a distracting way that you just can't ignore it. And the worst part is, most of these suits just really suck. Look, they took this really good looking suit and decided, you know what this needs? A bunch of ugly ass gold lines everywhere. Perfect. Anyways, time for shit to hit the fan. Now, I actually really like this scene. I love how Peter's spider sense just smelled Green Goblin's aura the second he showed up. And the fight scene that comes after this is really solid. But right after, this movie commits the biggest sin in this whole series. It retcons Uncle Ben's existence. And I really don't like it for two main reasons. One, Spider-Man as a character has always been a good person, but one of the things that makes him so interesting is that he's not a perfect person. If not for Uncle Ben, he would have used his powers for selfish reasons. Like he probably would have ended up in the NBA or something. But the lesson that Uncle Ben taught him is the reason he puts on the mask and saves people. And that's a very core part of the character. And if you want to change that, you A, need to have a very good reason, and B, need to have that be the plan the whole time. Which leads me to the second problem. This wasn't the plan the whole time. I mentioned this earlier, but if you go back and watch these movies, especially Homecoming and Civil War, they heavily imply that Tom Holland's Spider-Man had already lost his Uncle Ben before we met him. So changing it at the last minute like this is such a weird and half-baked decision that legitimately only makes the previous movies worse. Seriously, did you even proofread the script? And now we get to this scene, and it's my least favorite scene in the whole movie. So first of all, Ned shouldn't even be able to start opening a portal. It is shown to us in the Doctor Strange movie that it is incredibly difficult to open a portal, even if you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing. So Ned being able to do it on accident is kind of ridiculous. Second of all, come on, man. Why is this whole shot CGI? Like, who the fuck is this? This man is not Andrew Garfield. Look at the collarbone. Putting aside the fact that the CG model looks like a skinwalker, could you really not just have this man just jump like this? Was it really necessary to CGI the whole shot? It's just so lazy. Also, I really hate the built-in clap pause. It's just so awkward and cringe, and honestly, that goes for the whole scene. Also, this scene comes right after Aunt May got clipped. Like, that just happened. We should probably not have cringe, awkward Chungus humor right now. Also, why did they do this song and dance of, oh, I'm looking for him because I just get the sense that he needs help right now? You know, you could have just said that you saw the news, right? I say again, did nobody proofread the script? So anyway, after they give Peter a little pep talk, they go to start making cures. And again, they just kind of make them. So it's still not rewarding. Also, the explanation for the Green Goblin's cure is so funny.
I think I can make an anti-serum for Dr. Osborn. Been thinking about it a long time.
Word. Anyway, it's time for the final battle. And oh, no, wait, we gotta sit down and watch this scene first, which I don't really mind, but it does ruin the tension a bit. And now it's time for the final battle. And wait a minute, why is Sandman fighting them? Seriously, why? He says multiple times that all he wants to do is go home. He should be helping them. But I guess that wouldn't help the whole Sinister Six thing they have going on. Also, come on, dude, could you really not get him back for one scene? Wait, you too? But aside from all that, the rest of this fight is pretty cool. and I really love the scene where Andrew saves MJ. It's just a really great moment, and the rest of the movie is actually really solid. Except for the really stupid fake out death with Toby, it's just so cheap and manipulative, and it leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. But anyway, the universe starts falling apart, and the only way to fix it is by making everyone forget about him, for some reason. It doesn't make any sense, but what it leads to is really good. This whole ending is really sad, and I love it. And despite the issues I have with these movies, the ending still got me in my feelings a little bit. And honestly, that's the goal. Good job, movie. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned that the fan reaction to this movie is a big part of why I didn't like it. And the reason might not be what you think. Because when I went to see this movie, I was so excited and I was fully expecting to love this movie. And I was really disappointed when I didn't. So when I got home and I checked online to see what other people were saying, aside from the usual suspects that just hate everything, no, take that off the screen, I actually like things, I swear. Anyway, everyone I saw was loving this movie. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, I got a little bit jealous. It's not like I came into it wanting to hate it. I really wanted to love this movie, but I just couldn't. This movie isn't horrible. It isn't the worst movie ever made, but there's just so much wrong with it. From the script that was proofread by an illiterate person to the horrendous overuse of CGI, this movie just has so many problems. And even though I do love the ending, it's still not enough to save it. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 10. 10,000 subscribers and I'll talk about the Arkham games. Bye.
Officer Bowles.